They said it was just a routine operation, a simple procedure to fix a torn artery near his aorta. Nothing life-threatening, nothing to worry about. But just days later, Jon English was gone. The rocker who once electrified stadiums, who filled theaters with his booming voice and rebellious energy, died not from a car crash, not from overdose or illness, but from what many believe was a fatal medical mistake. And no one saw it coming. Before he died, whispers had already begun. That his health wasn't what it seemed, that stress and age were catching up. But even his closest friends were stunned when news broke that the man who had survived decades in the brutal entertainment industry had fallen in a hospital room. Reports claimed he suffered multiple organ failure after complications. But the details were vague, and the silence from the hospital only fed the fire. Was it really just a tragic accident, or something more preventable? Jon English wasn't just another rock star. He was Australia's own renegade bard, a man of theater, of music, of soul. He lived with intensity and died in mystery. And behind his untamed hair, signature leather jacket, and wild-eyed performances, there was a man deeply driven, often troubled, and at the end, perhaps betrayed by the very system meant to save him. Tonight, we uncover the story not just of a performer, but of a man whose final days left more questions than answers. The glory, the rebellion, the rise, and the fall wrapped in medical shadows. This is the untold truth behind Jon English's final performance, the one he never got to finish. In the golden haze of the 1970s, when rock was raw and theater was bold, Jon English emerged as a force that didn't just entertain, he disrupted. Born in 1949 in Hampstead, London, and raised in Sydney from the age of 12, Jon didn't fit neatly into categories. He wasn't just a rock singer. He wasn't just an actor. He wasn't just a songwriter. He was all of them, fused into one volatile, magnetic presence. In a cultural landscape still figuring out what Australian identity looked like on the world stage, he became one of its loudest, proudest voices. His breakthrough came not from a chart-topping single, but from a role that required him to scream, betray, and break down on stage night after night. Judas Iscariot in the Australian production of Jesus Christ Superstar. It was 1972, and Jon English, relatively unknown at the time, was thrust into the spotlight. His performance was electric, angry, desperate, spiritual. Audiences weren't just watching a character. They were watching a man become possessed by the music. It was clear this wasn't just theater. This was prophecy, wrapped in long hair and black leather. From there, his career exploded. With hits like Hollywood 7, Six Ribbons, and Turn the Page, Jon rode the rock wave with a uniquely theatrical flair. He was rough but emotional, humorous but tragic. He could headline rock festivals, then turn around and star in a musical or television series like Against the Wind, which brought him international fame, especially in Scandinavia. He was the artist who never stood still, who refused to be boxed in. He was constantly shifting, genre to genre, screen to stage, guitar to script. But behind the whirlwind career was a man who rarely rested. Friends recalled how he would finish a concert, get on a flight, and arrive straight to rehearsal the next morning. He never stopped. There were jokes about him being Australia's hardest working performer, but underneath that nickname lay exhaustion, pressure, and perhaps a denial of the toll it all took. As the years wore on, Jon never truly faded. While many of his peers retired or fell silent, he kept touring, writing, acting, even into his 60s. But fame is a tide that doesn't always rise. The big venues became smaller. The lights dimmed a little. Still, he persisted. Still, he sang. And then, in early 2016, came a seemingly minor health setback. Jon was scheduled for a simple procedure on an aortic aneurysm. At his age, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Doctors didn't seem alarmed. He had joked about being back on stage in no time. But just days after surgery, the unthinkable happened. Multiple organ failure. He slipped into unconsciousness. And then, the news. Jon English was dead. The country mourned. Fans lit candles. Radio stations played his greatest hits. But amid the tributes, something else lingered. Something unspoken. How did a routine operation go so catastrophically wrong? Why was there so little clarity? And why did his death feel less like an end and more like a cover being thrown over a mystery? The story of Jon English isn't just about the rise of a rock icon. It's about how even the loudest voices can be silenced in the most ordinary of places. And in his case, how the stage curtains fell. not after applause, but after a silence no one expected. Long before the theaters and television screens echoed with his name, Jon English was just another migrant kid trying to find rhythm in a strange new world. When his family moved from London to Sydney in the early 1960s, he was a shy, bespectacled boy with a British accent and no clear sense of belonging. But music was his anchor. He picked up a guitar, joined a school band, and like many of his generation, found solace in the wail of rock and roll. By the late 1960s, Jon was fronting a psychedelic band called Sebastian Hardy, not yet famous, but already showing signs of his theatrical flair. The group didn't last long, but it was enough to put Jon on the radar of producers casting the Australian version of Jesus Christ Superstar. In 1972, when he walked onto the stage as Judas, it changed everything. His eyes burned, his voice cracked with desperation, and audiences couldn't look away. That performance catapulted him into stardom, not just as a singer, but as a storyteller with thunder in his lungs. Riding that wave, he launched his solo music career. Turn the Page came in 1974, followed by the hauntingly cinematic Hollywood 7, a song that perfectly matched Jon's taste for characters on the edge. He didn't just sing, he inhabited every lyric. Then came Six Ribbons, a delicate ballad from the TV miniseries Against the Wind, a rare moment of softness that topped charts across Europe. In Norway and Sweden, Jon English became a household name. He was invited to perform in packed Scandinavian stadiums, where local fans, moved by his sincerity and rugged charm, treated him like royalty. But Jon wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing expression. He threw himself into everything, acting in television dramas, writing musicals, producing pantomimes, mentoring younger performers. His one-man shows mixed comedy, tragedy, and blistering guitar solos. He could play Shakespeare one night and rock out the next. He was unpredictable, but never unwatchable. Yet with such relentless energy came consequences. The cracks began to show in the late 1980s. His music was less present on the charts. New generations were emerging with a different sound, a different aesthetic. Jon, true to himself, didn't try to follow trends. But that meant losing the spotlight in an industry always hungry for the next big thing. Still, he worked. Touring tirelessly across rural Australia, he performed in clubs, town halls, RSLs, anywhere that still had a stage. For his fans, this wasn't a step down, but a testament to his authenticity. He was never above them. He belonged with them. Stories surfaced of Jon staying after shows to share beers with strangers, cracking jokes, taking photos, listening as much as he spoke. Fame had never made him untouchable. Privately, though, the wear was undeniable. Years of travel, stress, and performing had taken a toll on his body. He brushed it off with jokes, of course. He was the type to laugh through pain, but those close to him noticed the fatigue in his eyes. He was no longer sprinting across the stage. His gait was heavier, his breath more labored. But he never stopped. Then came the decision in early 2016. A tear near his aorta needed attention. Doctors scheduled a minor operation. The plan was clear: go in, get patched up, get back to the tour. There were still shows to do, scripts to write, songs to sing. Jon even reassured friends, cracking wise that he'd be bionic by the end of it. But the operation didn't go as planned. Reports later suggested internal bleeding, followed by multiple organ failure. It spiraled fast. Within days, Jon was gone. For a man whose life had been defined by drama, applause, and unrelenting motion, the quiet, clinical nature of his death felt unreal. Fans struggled to make sense of it. Had something been missed? Was there negligence? Or was it just the final curtain call no one could prepare for? Jon English had spent over 4 decades giving himself to the world, burning bright, living loud, never holding back. But in the end, it wasn't rock and roll, nor age, nor lifestyle that claimed him. It was something far more ordinary, and perhaps far more tragic. In the days that followed Jon English's death, the headlines were respectful, mourning the loss of a beloved entertainer, a man who had given so much to the Australian stage and soundscape. But behind the tributes, behind the replayed hits and glowing eulogies, there was an unease that refused to fade. Jon had not died in a car crash. He had not succumbed to years of hard living or a hidden illness. He died, quite simply, after a surgery that was never meant to be dangerous. The official reports were sterile. Jon underwent surgery to address an aortic aneurysm, a bulging artery near the heart, a condition that, while serious, is routinely treated. But following the procedure, complications arose. He suffered from massive internal bleeding. His organs began to fail. His condition worsened rapidly. By the time it was clear how serious things were, it was already too late. What truly happened in that operating theater? The hospital offered little. The family was private, and the public, left with fragments and whispers, began to ask their own questions. Medical experts commenting anonymously suggested that bleeding from a torn aorta should have been anticipated, that the signs might have been missed. Some spoke of a possible delay in diagnosis. Others mentioned that the surgery may not have been urgent, prompting debate about whether it should have been done at all, or whether Jon had been given full clarity about the risks. There was no lawsuit, no public inquest, only silence. And in that silence, speculation grew. Fans and friends wondered whether Jon, always the workhorse, had brushed aside health warnings, whether the medical team had underestimated the procedure's complexity, or whether Australia had lost a national treasure because someone simply wasn't paying enough attention. Friends close to Jon struggled to come to terms with the news. His longtime collaborators described him as being in great spirits. Just days before the surgery, he had tours lined up, scripts on his desk. He was planning. He was dreaming. He was living. One fellow performer recalled a call where Jon joked, "They'll have me back on stage next week. Maybe I'll sing from a hospital bed." Instead, they lowered his casket. The Australian music industry, caught off guard, paid tribute with sorrow, but also confusion. How could someone so vibrant be taken so quickly and so quietly? Fans flooded social media with not just memories, but outrage, questioning how a standard procedure could go so wrong. Some called for investigation. Others accepted it as just one of those things. But beneath it all was grief twisted with doubt. One quote stood out. A fan wrote, "Jon survived the brutality of rock, the madness of showbiz, and 4 decades of relentless touring, but he couldn't survive a hospital." It captured what many felt but couldn't say out loud, that Jon English didn't die of fate, but of failure. His son, in a statement, described the family's devastation, but chose not to blame. "We just want to remember him for the joy he brought," he said. But those who knew Jon's tenacity, his refusal to go quietly, suspected he would have demanded answers if the roles were reversed. To this day, there's no clear explanation. No one has admitted fault. There is no scandal headline, no dramatic expose. And yet, for those who admired him, who watched him pour out his soul in every lyric, who saw him as more than a performer, the lingering question remains: was Jon English's death truly unavoidable? To speak of Jon English is to speak of contradiction, the kind that makes legends. He was loud, yet thoughtful, wild on stage, yet profoundly grounded off it. He was a working-class hero who never styled himself as one, and a global star who never acted like a celebrity. In an industry increasingly polished, curated, and safe, Jon was messy, honest, and defiantly real. And that's exactly why he mattered. From this channel's point of view, Jon English represents something rare in the Australian entertainment story. A multi-talented artist who not only crossed genres, rock, opera, theater, television, but owned every single space he walked into. Most performers are lucky to master one craft. Jon moved through 5 without ever losing his rawness. He didn't chase trends. He didn't rebrand himself for the algorithm. He stayed true to the voice, the attitude, and the fire that defined him from the very first time he stepped on stage. He had charisma, but never arrogance. He joked like your uncle at a barbecue, but then could turn around and deliver a performance so emotionally shattering it left theaters breathless. This duality was no accident. It was the core of who he was. And yet, despite the towering talent and the longevity of his career, Jon English was often under-acknowledged. While others with less output were awarded and immortalized, Jon remained on the road, playing smaller venues, still giving 100%, even when the spotlight faded. Perhaps the industry didn't know where to place him. Was he rock? Was he theater? Was he television? In truth, he was all of it. And that refusal to be boxed in may have cost him the institutional recognition he deserved. But here's what Jon never lacked: love. From fans who followed him across decades, from collaborators who remembered his generosity, from younger performers who saw in him not just a mentor, but a mirror of what it meant to stay authentic. He left behind not just songs and scripts, but stories, thousands of them, shared in dressing rooms, in pubs, in small towns where he still turned up, guitar in hand, smile on face. As for his death, this channel chooses to look at it not just as a medical mishap, but as a cultural loss that Australia never truly processed. The absence of answers, the lack of accountability, and the muted aftermath only deepened the wound. When someone like Jon English dies, we don't just lose a person, we lose a piece of who we are. This story isn't just about one man. It's about how we treat our artists, about how we value them when they're gone more than when they're alive, about how institutions can fail even the strongest among us, and how the silence afterward can be the loudest injustice of all. What do you remember most about Jon English? His voice? His fire? His kindness? Or simply the feeling that he gave you when the lights dimmed and the music began? Let us know, because stories like this one, they don't belong to the media. They belong to us. There's a strange kind of silence that follows the passing of someone like Jon English. Not the silence of absence, but the silence filled with echoes. The kind that lives in empty stages, in backstage corridors still carrying the smell of old amps and leather jackets, in the soft hum of a car radio when Six Ribbons begins to play. It's the kind of silence that reminds you something rare has slipped away, and you didn't realize how much it mattered until it was gone. For those who grew up with his voice, who saw him tear through the role of Judas or croon beneath stage lights in country halls, Jon English wasn't just an entertainer. He was part of the fabric, of late nights, of youth, of rebellion, of love lost and found in verses. He was flawed, funny, intense, and heartbreakingly human. And that's why his story hurts. He didn't die in the blaze of celebrity. There were no reality shows, no final PR tours, just a man still working, still giving, still believing the next stage was waiting. And then, in the middle of a procedure no one thought dangerous, the curtain fell. No encore, no last song. Some stories are never told, but now you know. And in knowing, you carry a little piece of it. Of him, of the music that didn't follow fashion, of the voice that cracked with sincerity, of the artist who never stopped moving. Not because he feared stillness, but because he loved the road too much. Jon English may not have statues, but he has memories. In theaters that still remember his echo, in fans who still hum his songs, in a culture that was shaped, whether it admits it or not, by the man who refused to play it safe. The lights have dimmed, the stage is empty, but somewhere on a grainy tape, in a dusty LP, or in a heart that once beat faster to his rhythm, Jon still plays. And maybe that's enough.